Okay, let's unpack this. We're about to delve into a truly monumental piece of legal history, something that might seem like just dusty old text at first glance, but it actually laid down a foundational framework. It still resonates today, you know? Today we're exploring the Code of Hammurabi. More than just ancient laws, it's really an enduring blueprint for how society works.
Absolutely. And our mission in this deep dive is, well, to uncover exactly how this ancient legal system, we're talking nearly 4,000 years old, established groundwork. Groundwork for concepts like justice, governance, even economic stability that are, frankly, surprisingly relevant today. We'll look for those fascinating insights and, put them into context for you, the listener.
Right. Yeah. And to help us navigate this incredible history, we've got a fantastic stack of sources, a mix of insightful historical analyses, expert interpretations, and crucially specific excerpts taken directly from the code itself. So yeah, get ready for a pretty comprehensive and engaging exploration. Let's begin by grounding ourselves in the history. Who was Hammurabi, and when did this remarkable legal achievement actually happen? We're talking about the sixth king of Babylon, Hammurabi himself. He reigned from 1792 to 1750 BCE. And his famous code, that was established around 1770 BCE. Just think about that time frame for a second.
It's truly astonishing, isn't it? The code itself had 282 meticulously written articles. And it wasn't hidden away somewhere. No, it was engraved on a large diorite stele, displayed prominently in Babylon's Temple of Marduk, their main god. And importantly, copies were also put up on stone pillars in public squares across Babylonia, that's modern southern Iraq. This made sure people could actually see it. Public accessibility, remarkably progressive idea for its time, really. And while the text itself is in Akkadian, the principles, they were rooted in much older Sumerian law. It seems like a deliberate effort to integrate diverse traditions and peoples into one unified legal system.
So Hammurabi wasn't just a king then, he was a strategist, a leader aiming to unify this diverse society, foster public order. By systematically amending and, codifying existing laws, his stated mission, it's right there in the code's prologue, quote, to make justice visible in the land, to destroy the wicked, that the strong might not injure the weak. It's striking how that sentiment, that desire for order and protection just echoes through history.
It really does. Before the code, legal decisions were often, ad hoc, handled case by case. Hammurabi transformed this into an organized, predictable legal structure, and that laid significant groundwork for later legal codes all across the ancient Near East. It's widely recognized as one of the earliest comprehensive legal codes, embodying these aspirations for social justice and effective governance that were, honestly, incredibly advanced for the era.
And thinking beyond just legal reform, putting this code out everywhere, standardizing it, that was also a brilliant political move, wasn't it? The deliberate effort to centralize governance, administrative systems.
Exactly.
By replacing all those different local customs with one single imperial framework, Hammurabi really solidified his authority throughout his territories. That's a vital step in state building and showing he had this divine mandate to rule.
Yeah, and what's particularly compelling is how incredibly long-lasting its impact was. Not just as some historical document gathering dust, but as an active tool. Historical records show it was studied, copied, used as a model for legal reasoning for, get this, at least 1,500 years after it was created.
Wow, 1,500 years.
Right. This prolonged use suggests it was a dynamic legal framework, continuously informing judicial practice, legal education in Mesopotamia. It fostered the shared legal culture and intellectual tradition for millennia. It's quite something.
Okay, so we've got the context, Hammurabi's ambition. Let's now pull back the curtain on the laws themselves. What kind of revelations or surprising parallels might we find in the day-to-day life of Babylon through these laws? The 282 laws covered a huge spectrum of Babylonian life. Really, everything. Economic regulations, prices, tariffs, wages, family law, marriage, divorce, inheritance, adoption. Then you have criminal law, assault, theft, homicide, and civil law, slavery, property rights, even holding builders responsible. It's quite telling, I think, that roughly half the code was about contracts and economic stuff, and about a third on household and family issues.
Yes, it gives such a vivid snapshot of their society. And within these laws, we find some really critical legal principles. The most famous one, of course, is lex talionis, often translated as an eye for an eye, retributive justice. For example, law 196 states, if a man has put out the eye of a free man, they shall put out his eye. Pretty direct. And law 200, if a man knocks out the tooth of a free man equal in rank to himself, they shall knock out his tooth.
But that eye for an eye idea, it wasn't just applied straight across the board in every single case, was it? There was more nuance.
Precisely. That's a crucial point. Its application was highly nuanced. Penalties varied significantly. depended on social class, even gender sometimes. Often, monetary compensation was the prescribed penalty instead of direct physical retaliation,
Yeah.
especially if the victim was of lower status or, considered property.
Right.
Like Law 199 says, if he puts out the eye of a free man slave,
Yeah.
he shall pay half his price. This detail really underscores the rigid social stratification that just permeated Babylonian society.
Okay, so how exactly was that hierarchy structured? Can you tell us more about those different classes and how they affected legal outcomes?
Sure. Babylonian society was, well, rigidly divided into three main classes.
Yeah.
You had the Amalu, these were the patricians, the elite, the top tier. Then the Mushkinu, a free person, often landless, maybe like a commoner. And finally, the Ardu, who were slaves. And legal rights, responsibilities, punishments, they were profoundly different depending on which class you were in. An Amalu, for example, had full civil rights, but could face heavier punishments for certain offenses. A Mushkinu might typically receive monetary compensation for injuries. And the Ardu, the slaves, while legally seen as property, they actually had surprisingly nuanced rights. They could acquire property, own other slaves, engage in business, even marry non-slaves, and their children would be free.
Wow.
And they could even purchase their own freedom. That's a level of autonomy we might not expect for slaves back then.
That breakdown of Milu, Mushkinu, Ardu is fascinating, especially those unexpected rights for slaves. What about women's rights within this whole structure? How did the code address their legal standing?
Well, their rights mostly centered around things like marriage contracts, dowries, and divorce. If a man initiated a divorce, he had obligations. He had to restore the dowry, provide child support. Now, a so-called bad wife could face severe degradation, yes, but interestingly, a wife could also charge her husband with cruelty and neglect. She could actually take him to court, get a judicial separation, and keep her dowry. So there was a form of legal protection and recourse for women, even within what was clearly a patriarchal system.
What really stands out, maybe unexpectedly, is how much of this ancient thinking seems to resonate with our modern legal ideas. Let's get into those early concepts that kind of shaped our understanding of justice.
Indeed. It's quite remarkable. The code established a foundational presumption of innocence, and it allowed for the presentation of evidence. You had to prove your case. And people who brought false accusations, they faced severe penalties, even death if the accusation was for a capital offense. And this applied to false testimony, too. It really aimed to reinforce legal integrity.
Right? Needing proof, punishing false claims. That's pretty advanced for nearly 4,000 years ago.
It is. And it seems to have approached culpability or blame in a very specific way, focusing more on direct consequences, on causality, rather than digging into complex psychological intent like we might today.
Okay, so less about why someone did something, more about what happened as a result.
Exactly. While complex intent wasn't maybe the primary focus, negligence was clearly and severely penalized. Take the example of a builder. It's quite compelling. If his shoddy work caused the death of the homeowner, the builder himself faced the death penalty. That's Law 229.
Whoa.
And if his bad work just destroyed property, he had to replace what was destroyed and rebuild the house using his own resources. Law 232. It highlights this strong sense of professional accountability for the direct consequences of your work or lack thereof.
So if I'm living in Babylon and my roof caves in because the builder cut corners, he's not just paying for repairs, he could literally be facing death. Talk about professional accountability. And property rights were obviously a huge deal too, right?
Unequivocally, the code strongly acknowledged private property, and that included slaves as property violations, met with severe penalties, often capital punishment. Written contracts were frequently required and strictly enforced. This fostered predictability, trust in economic interactions. And this extended to really meticulous regulation of professions and even wages. Law 257 set wages for farm laborers 8 GUR of corn per year. Law 258, 6 GUR for ox herds. Physicians too. They got paid 5 shekels for healing a broken bone. But they also faced, quote, dire punishments for poor outcomes.
Okay, so putting this all together, what's the sort of core takeaway about Babylonian justice? It feels profoundly pragmatic, like balancing that eye for an eye retribution with practical things,
Sure.
economic value, social hierarchy, making things right through restitution, the focus on tangible harm, clear accountability, even for negligence. It reveals a system that really prioritized economic stability and social order above all else. And its predictability, even with all the inequalities, must have contributed to societal stability.
Absolutely. And that pragmatic approach extended to a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of professional responsibility. Those laws about builders and physicians, they indicate an early recognition of accountability for services. It sort of foreshadows modern concepts like consumer protection and professional regulation. It's quite remarkable how early they established these ideas of accountability for skilled labor. It really underscores their focus on a well-ordered, functioning society.
So the code clearly shaped Babylonian society profoundly. It wasn't just a list of laws, it was more like a blueprint for their entire social structure, daily life, how justice was done.
That's exactly right. The code rigorously reinforced the existing hierarchy, clearly detailing the distinct rights and responsibilities for each class: the Amalu, the Mushkinu, the Ardu. And as we talked about, there were those surprising nuances for slaves, pathways to freedom and financial protections for women in situations like divorce.
And beyond just the social structure, it regulated daily life itself meticulously. Everything from buying and selling to family relationships to how professionals conducted themselves. We saw provisions for what you could almost call an ancient minimum wage for some jobs, and that strong emphasis on written contracts brought a crucial formality and predictability to business.
Right, and by standardizing these legal practices across all these diverse territories, it really helped unify the Babylonian Empire. It strengthened the central government's control. Hammurabi clearly linked his vision of justice with prosperity. He showed this awareness that a stable legal environment was fundamental for economic activity, for the well-being of the whole society.
Now, Hammurabi famously said his goal was to protect the weak from the strong.
Yeah.
But as we've seen, the code also explicitly set up these rigid social hierarchies. How do we square that? How do we reconcile that stated goal with the reality of the structure it enforced?
Well, it definitely didn't mean universal equality as we think of it today. That wasn't the concept. Instead, protecting the weak meant providing a defined legal status and specific, though limited, protections within the existing hierarchy. So, for instance, while a slave was property, they still had certain legal recourses, pathways to freedom. They weren't just subject to pure whim. This created a predictable framework for everyone, high or low. It contributed to stability by preventing utter chaos or arbitrary oppression, even while it maintained those inherent class differences. It was about defining everyone's rights and place within an accepted order, not about dismantling that order itself.
The code also reveals a pretty deep level of state involvement in regulating the economy, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That substantial portion of the code dealing with contracts, wages, property rights, professional accountability. It points to a deliberate, systematic attempt to manage and stabilize economic interactions. The idea of setting fair prices and wages, even back then, was an early form of economic regulation aimed at stability and, well, a kind of fairness within their system. This comprehensive economic governance document really fostered trust in transactions, trust in labor relations. That was vital for the empire's prosperity. And it does prompt that timeless question, doesn't it? How much should a state intervene in its economy to ensure stability and fairness? It's a debate we're still having.
Okay, let's pivot now to the code's lasting impact. Its influence clearly stretched way beyond ancient Babylonia. It shaped later legal systems across the ancient world, and maybe resonates even now. Here's where the ripple effect of this ancient code gets really interesting.
It's widely seen as this remarkable piece of legislation that really established foundational groundwork for pretty much all subsequent legal codes across the ancient Near East. Its pioneering focus on written laws, on systematic legal codification. It served as a direct model.
Yeah.
It profoundly influenced the legal traditions of neighbors like the Hittites and the Assyrians. The very idea of having a comprehensive legal code available publicly. That became a defining hallmark of advanced civilizations, partly thanks to Hammurabi.
And it had a significant influence on jurisprudence itself, right? On legal thinking. It brought in this unprecedented degree of legal predictability, consistency. You could even argue that the beginnings of legal precedent trace back to Hammurabi's codification, along with those contributions to evidence-based trials and that early articulation of presumption of innocence.
Yes, and it also played a crucial role in linking justice explicitly with morality. That's a profound connection that shaped later civilizations, very much including the Judeo-Christian tradition. The principle of an eye, for instance, is a really notable and direct example shared with Mosaic law. Shows a clear line of influence there.
And its enduring legacy is just incredible, not just some historical artifact, but actively studied, copied, and used as a model for legal reasoning for at least 1,500 years after it was made. Its flexibility, its significance, still recognized by scholars today, nearly 4,000 years later. It's mind-boggling.
That continuous study, meticulous copying by scribes over centuries, it ensured its principles kept informing legal practice long after Hammurabi was gone. It really contributed to the very concept of having a persistent, evolving authoritative body of law. It's a true testament to the institutionalization of legal knowledge in a way that feels surprisingly modern.
And finally, let's touch on that profound integration of divine authority. You mentioned the stele was in Marduk's temple. Hammurabi proclaimed himself an agent of the gods. The prologue is his, the epilogue is attributed to the god Marduk himself. This wasn't just symbolic, was it?
No, not at all. It was absolutely core to its power and acceptance. This deliberate weaving together of divine authority with human legislation gave the laws immense, almost unquestionable legitimacy. It transformed them from just royal decrees into something like sacred mandates. This fusion of law, morality, and religion created an exceptionally powerful framework for social cohesion, for obedience. It suggests the code wasn't just a legal document, it was also a moral compass, and in a way, a religious text guiding basically every aspect of life.
So what does all this mean for us today? I mean, obviously we're not going to resurrect Hammurabi's code directly, that wouldn't be practical. But its underlying principles, they seem to offer incredibly valuable insights for our contemporary legal systems, for governance frameworks.
Indeed they do. First, just its comprehensive nature and the fact it was publicly accessible. That provided a clear, unambiguous legal framework. It promoted predictability. Having this unified written code meant citizens, theoretically, knew it was permissible, what the consequences were. That fosters order, consistency. And this principle of transparent, universally accessible law, it minimizes uncertainty, enhances public trust. It functions a bit like an early form of constitutional government, setting limits.
Right. And what lessons can we take from its economic side?
Well, the code's strong recognition of private property rights, the sanctity of contracts, that provided a really robust foundation for economic activity back then. Its provisions for regulated wages and prices, you could reinterpret that today as aiming for fair prices and wages within their context, preventing exploitation, promoting a kind of economic equity. And that accountability for professional negligence ensured quality service, or at least consequences for failure. It suggests that a carefully considered degree of state-mandated economic regulation can actually lead to greater stability and maybe reduced inequalities by ensuring some baseline fairness in transactions and labor relations. It's a balance still debated today, of course.
What about accountability and deterrence? The penalties were harsh.
They were. The code's clear, often severe consequences, including lex talionis for certain crimes, definitely provided strong deterrence. It promoted personal responsibility. And its focus on causality, holding people responsible for the direct outcomes of their actions, simplified legal proceedings and put a high premium on diligence. Be careful what you do. A legal system with clear, predictable, consistent consequences, even if they seem harsh to us now, does cultivate accountability. It deters criminal behavior. And don't forget those severe penalties for false accusations. That promoted integrity within the legal process itself, a concern for truth that's timeless.
And the protection of the vulnerable, how does that principle translate for us?
Hammurabi's explicit mission statement, to protect the vulnerable, and those specific provisions for widows, orphans, the weak. It showed a foundational concern for social welfare, even within that very hierarchical structure. The detailed family laws also aim to ensure stability for family units. It highlights the enduring importance, really, of a legal system safeguarding its most vulnerable members, preventing arbitrary harm, even if it doesn't eliminate all social inequalities.
Okay, and judicial integrity. It sounded like the code had thoughts on that too.
Absolutely. It included explicit provisions for pretty robust judicial accountability. Like, a judge who got a case wrong could be permanently removed from office.
Seriously?
Yes. And again, severe penalties for false accusations and false testimony deterred perjury, frivolous claims. This foresight recognized just how critical a trustworthy, competent judiciary is for society to function. It fosters public confidence in the whole system.
And finally, just thinking about the code itself as an act of institution building.
It really is a monumental exercise in institution building. Its comprehensive scope, its systematic organization, its incredible longevity. It demonstrates how a well-conceived, publicly accessible legal framework can establish enduring societal structures, providing a robust blueprint for stable governance, for sustained economic development. It offers invaluable lessons, even now, for modern states looking to strengthen their own institutional foundations. It functions like a proto-rule of law, prioritizing a predictable, consistent legal framework over just arbitrary command.
So, to kind of wrap this up, the Code of Hammurabi stands as one of humanity's earliest, most comprehensive legal systems. Truly a groundbreaking achievement. It brought unprecedented order, predictability, centralized governance to ancient Babylonia. Its foundational concepts like lex talionis understood in its context, those clearly defined social roles, early hints of due process like presumption of innocence, judicial accountability, they laid this powerful groundwork for a structured society.
Its profound and lasting influence on subsequent legal traditions is just undeniable. It established foundational concepts, legal codification, predictability, that enduring link between law, morality, and religion. And this ancient legal text, it continues to offer valuable insights into what's needed for a well-ordered, prosperous society, particularly highlighting the value of structured governance, economic stability, accountability, protecting the vulnerable, and ensuring judicial integrity.
Yeah, the fact that the code, just by making laws visible, accessible, and by holding even judges accountable, that it laid this rudimentary groundwork for the idea that everyone, maybe even rulers, should operate within a defined legal structure, not just by arbitrary command. That's a powerful idea that really does transcend millennia, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. This ancient code reminds us that the quest for order, for fairness, and the huge benefits of having a predictable, institutionalized legal environment. These are truly timeless human endeavors. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. What aspects of our own laws today do you think best reflect this enduring quest for a stable and prosperous civilization?